Between two rival governments in Libya has worsened. The situation has heightened the risk of fighting or territorial division. This as the parliament in the east swore in a new administration while the incumbent in Tripoli refused to cede power.
The current Prime Minister Abdul Hamid al-Debai in Tripoli says he will not hand over control of the government. Meanwhile, addressing the parliament after taking the oath of office, Fathi Bashaga said he is studying all options to take over in Tripoli. Armed groups affiliated with both sides have mobilized in the capital. At the same time, foreign forces, including Turkey and Russia, remain entrenched in Libya nearly 18 months after a ceasefire ended the last major bout of warfare. Underlining the tense situation, Bashaga's office has accused Deba of using force to try to stop his cabinet reaching Tobruk for the parliament session by closing airspace and seizing 3 ministers who tried to travel by land. The United Nations cast doubt overnight on the validity of the parliament's effort to install Bashaga, saying it is concerned by reports that Tuesday's vote of confidence fell short of the expected standards. The position of international powers will be key in the coming tussle for control of Libya, with a risk of renewed war after a year and a half of comparative peace between major factions battling for control of the oil-rich state.
All right, we're joined now by African Affairs Analyst and Channel Africa producer Izak Khomo to talk a little bit more about this story. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for speaking to us. So what is your assessment of the situation? Does that mean that it's official there is now two parallel governments in Libya?
Thank you for having me and thank you for the question. Well, what it means is just what it is. And there's something much more serious than that, is this, that the peace which had been obtained is very fragile, and right now it appears that it's on the verge of breaking down. Libya is on the verge of actually slipping back to open warfare between two opposing groups. Now, that is the most serious thing.
We know the last time you and I spoke, the fact that the Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deba has claimed legitimacy. He was very clear in the fact that he would not relinquish his position. We now know that the change that's been announced is the confirming of Prime Minister Fathi Bashaga. Can you tell us a little bit more about these two individuals and why their being at the helm should create these fissures?
Well, before we even talk about these two individuals, basically you've got to understand the two power groups or the two power points from where the Libyan dichotomy actually is taking place. You've got a parliament or a House of Representatives which has actually relocated westwards to the eastern town of Tobruk. That's where they've actually relocated, and it's from there that they're claiming to be representatives of the Libyan people. Now, at the same time, you find that the United Nations had actually come together and tried to appoint a leadership which would be acceptable and which would look after the transition period. Now, this is under Deba and as Prime Minister, and is based in Tripoli. Now, these two power points have actually been against each other. There's a very big contradiction. After saying that, I mean to say that you find that now there are two big players who have come up. Or may I say there's one big player that has come up, and that is Fathi Bashaga. Fathi Bashaga, he is an ex-Army Air Force pilot, and he seems to be a strong man in the Libyan area, seeing that he is the parliamentarians see that he's a person who's capable of actually putting Libya together and taking it forward. Whereas the incumbent, who was actually put there by the United Nations, Deba, he comes from a family of business people. Now, there is that thing of challenging Deba's presidency or prime ministership. Now, the neighbor, basically, he represents the people of the group, which is in western Libya. So that is the dichotomy, a dichotomy between the east, which is based in Tobruk, and the west, which is based in Tripoli. Mm-hmm. Now, those are the two groups which are contending for power.
How will the country then resolve this? Because this also has its history in the failure to hold presidential elections in December, and we know that those two, the process and procedure, were contested on the issue of legitimacy.
Basically, the whole thing about the collapse of this attempt to hold elections was due to the haphazard way that these elections were being planned. I mean to say that they tried to hold a presidential election without actually first getting getting the wanted changes to the constitution, be they temporary or whatever, and also a norm by which they would actually accept candidates and which candidates would be accepted. Now, the candidacy of some of the people who are fighting for the presidency created a very big confusion, like Gaddafi's son, and also Haftar himself, who comes from the east. But then you find that with the failure to hold elections on December 24th, now instead of all the groups coming together, it appeared that the prime minister tended to take over all powers and declared to actually postpone the elections for an indefinite period. Now that created a lot of dissatisfactions among certain groups, especially the group in the east. Now the only way forward is to get all the groups together to come and sit down and have a big meeting, which is going to have a very good timeline towards holding elections and ironing out any problems which are there as far as the candidacy and whatever. And from there, you get onto that roadmap. Now, that is the thing which is missing. Now, the roadmaps, they tend to be individualistic, or they tend to be sectarian, belonging to one group, one sector, other than one religion. And they're trying to force that on the national basis. No, that won't do.
As you say, the situation echoes what has been happening in Libya over the past couple of years. Could it also echo the escalating armed struggle that we saw back then? Dbeibah has said that he survived an attempted assassination, and we saw Mr. Basagi saying 2 of his ministers were prevented because of Dbeibah's enforcing should I say, some restriction on airspace in Libya. What is likely to happen over the next couple of days or weeks should there be no breakthrough in quelling detentions?
Well, let us say this, that the theme of an armed struggle or solving this whole situation militarily is out of the question. Simply because you find that the peaceful or the diplomatic mode of solving the Libyan problem, it has been due to the coming in of the Turks. The Turks came in there and they nullified the advantages that Haftar had. And therefore you find that the whole playing ground was leveled and there was no other way of actually solving this thing other than through a political and a diplomatic process. But that situation still lies because there are these two very big powerful forces, the UAE on one side and Saudi Arabia supporting the Eastern group, and also the Western group being supported by Turkey. But then you find that in a situation whereby you cannot get a military solution, Libya is going to slide into a situation of anarchy, whereby you have militias who are actually going to terrorize the people. Like, as you mentioned, the attempt on Dbeibah. I mean, Dbeibah's car was riddled with bullets. Now, that's what is going to happen. And the biggest sufferers basically will be the the citizenry. And now that is a situation that cannot be allowed or should not be allowed to develop, so that the big powers who are there, it is the EU, Russia, also together with Turkey and Egypt, they should come together and force the people to come and sit down and have this very big meeting. The opportunity is still there. The window is still there before attitudes harden and Libya slides into simple anarchy of street fighting.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. My colleague there, Izak Khomo, is African Affairs Analyst and African Producer at Channel Africa. Well, that's it for now.